Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who've been a part of our journey since the very beginning, and that's been a few years now. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Also, big thank you to Justice Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, and sci-fi dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does phenomenal commission pieces of any type. So check him out. So tonight, guys, we welcome back our dear friend and award-winning journalist Laura DiDio, who essentially was responsible for breaking the Amityville Horror story by obtaining exclusive interviews for Channel 5, 10 o'clock news, who produced the pieces on the seance and numerous psychics, including Ed and Lorraine Warren, and separately with the late Hans Holzer. So honestly, there was so much amazing information. There was just no way we couldn't do an actual part two. I mean, you knew that.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yeah, you know that, right? It's gonna be a
Perfect
thing.
timing. My hair's driving me crazy.
Yeah, we timed it just right. So, for All Hallows Eve, nothing better to talk about, and doesn't get much spookier than that. But hi, everybody, for chiming in. So hello, Z-Sun, Michelle, Jackie, Alan. Hello. Wow, okay. We're just all getting in there. Excellent. We appreciate you guys coming in, all the early birds. So anyway, tonight we are actually streaming on X as well as Rumble. Okay, so of course we have our usual Facebook pages, aside from CMH, just not a thing. It's just having hiccups. Apparently, it's just not liking StreamYard a whole lot. Hi, Michael.
I would say it's the platform.
I'm starting to wonder, but yet we have other ones up here. So I
know, but they've been making so many changes lately.
Yeah,
and there was a point where I couldn't even post the YouTube link on our promo. Remember, I had said to you, I can post it everywhere but on ours, and it was just strange. But now,
it's actually getting,
right now I can. So
it's getting really ridiculous with all of it. So, we had a really great listenership or viewership on X. So we're back on there, and I'm watching it. It's streaming live. Folks are watching it, and this is great. And Rumble, just so you know, people on Rumble, we can actually see your comments come up in the studio here, so we can flash your comments up like this or your questions.
Tell us you're there.
I know. Let us know
My favorite vampires in the house.
Because I see you guys in there. So I see you guys in there. I know you're there. So
Mr. Mallows, my favorite vampire. He's on tomorrow night.
He is.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other backed by popular demand. We want to hear more stories from Wayne. So that's that, right?
I shared my witch's hat that I made. And it just took me like forever. But I don't know if it's going to fit in my frame.
Right.
Because it's so high. But I just used some random I liked her on YouTube, some just this
There.
pattern. And then my daughter
There you
always at this
go,
time of
Michael.
year she marathon watches Harry Potter every
Yeah.
single year. So she
Right.
has it on and I'm looking and then I'm thinking, wait a minute, I have the Harry Potter crochet book, like all their stuff. It's really, really intricate, right? Because it's English and that. And I
Right.
look and there's the bloody hat.
Ba, ba, ba.
I'm like, that's why it looked so familiar. But mine's purple. It's not black.
That's that, right?
Yeah,
All right.
it's
For some reason, I'm not seeing that this invite went through. So bear with me. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. God darn it. It's just like, damn it. All right, we're going to try this again. Can you please send it?
Did you change your name on X?
No, it's always been the same. Hold on.
No, I mean you spell it different.
That's the only way they would take it.
Oh, doesn't it drive you crazy when someone else has your name?
Oh, I know. It's mine.
Exactly. Like, what's wrong with you people?
Send the link to. Oh my goodness. Okay, hold on. We're doing it different right now. Okay, 1 minute. No. DiDio Outlook. There it is. Okay. Here we go. All right, we're gonna try this one here.
Yay.
Okay,
I can't wait.
I know. There we go. There it goes. There it goes. Okay.
So exciting to hear from someone who was there, like walked in that place before anything changed.
Oh.
In all of the locations that she's going to discuss, she walked in there before anything was changed.
Well, I like that she's been able to walk in there by herself.
Oh,
so
I don't know if I would do that. Yeah. I don't know if I would do that. I know you would. I don't even question that. I think I'd need Michelle to walk in with me.
I would do it all day long. I think
I'd be drawn to that little boy and I wouldn't be able to focus. I'm not scared.
Yeah, Laura's brave. Yeah.
Yeah, she was very brave. She is brave, but I mean, she was really brave to go in there, and the thought of a seance with all of that.
Yeah.
I think it was surreal and just taking that all in. I mean, if I was in there and doing a seance, I'd be so happy.
I think the time she went in, it predated a lot of that as well. So it was a murder location at that point.
Yes.
I don't think, we grasp all of that. Like the whole story really unfolded after the fact. And she was contacted by the Lutzes. We covered that all in the first show. So there must have been something going on at that point.
Yeah.
Hello, Michael. Yeah, it is. Exactly. It was scary when we were younger, wasn't it?
I think the original is scary. If it scares you, that's good because that's the effect you want when you watch it. I believe. Hi, Ed. Good to see you. I believe that the remake, for me, the remakes are always the ones that I don't want to watch.
Right.
It doesn't even hit home to the original. Like it doesn't come close. They miss a lot of the story. But I know they had their own experiences when they filmed. It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. Ryan Reynolds is phenomenal. He's Canadian, just say. He's phenomenal. I love him, love his films. The movie was good, but the original was everything.
The originals are always better. I think they just remake everything, to death. But there have been so many good documentaries that have come out with it also, with respects to it, which, it's just, I think it's one of those, like, is it something we would deem as a cult classic because it just, it
like Black
doesn't
Christmas.
die, some places they do. It fades out with time. It might come up every now and then, but it's one of those things that realistically just does not go away.
No.
Right.
And The Exorcist is the #1 film for this season, which I get it. I understand it.
Amityville Horror.
Amityville Horror. And But I
how.
have to say the remake of The Omen, not The Omen
Mhm.
the beginning, but the remake of The Omen with
Mhm.
Liev Schreiber and Julia Stiles,
It's true, Jackie. Yeah.
best made Omen film out of all of them. Just
Mhm.
saying that right now.
Mhm.
But Michelle and I have two favorites that we share in common for horror flicks, and that's The Entity in
Mhm.
1980s
Mhm.
and The Others, besides the
Two
rights
two
and everything. But like
yeah.
that's different. That's different, not an Exorcist film.
There are different types of films for sure, and there's something that makes you think. Um, I don't know. I love to hear about things that have happened,
Me too.
and we've basically been asked. Hello, we've basically been asked to like. I honestly, I get I
Hi, Jess.
we get asked to do. I mean, I get emails to ask to do different types of shows all the time, and we're going to explore some of those in the new year. Just saying. So,
Mm.
um, because I think it's time. I think we can do certain things, but a lot of these type of stories always involve like a murder or something tragic that happens there
Yes,
as
I've
well.
seen it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show. Fantastic.
It's
Pope's
good.
Exorcist. Yeah.
It's a little silly, but that's normal. But
Yes.
it's a good film, meaning they tell the story of how, they came about this
Mhm.
exorcism school and Exorcist
Mhm.
believer. And I got like 15, 20 minutes into it and I turned it off twice.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
not
wow,
my
really?
it's not
Yeah.
my cup of tea, but I know a lot of people that like it. What
Mhm.
I do like, you were speaking of documentaries, and I think these are scarier than the movies, is the
Mhm.
Haunting in Connecticut documentary scared the crap out of
Documentaries
me,
are all yeah,
right?
actually, CL and I were just talking about that
Yeah.
yesterday,
And
so,
the
yeah.
and the Haunting in Georgia. The
Yeah.
documentaries were better than the movies. And if you wanna watch
Yeah.
something different, watch The Reaping.
Mhm. Bouncing around pot.
And you
Well,
wanna
that's
go
good, Mike. At least we
really
know where you are. We know
Yeah.
everything's working.
You wanna go really way back? Go to The Seventh Sign with Demi Moore.
It was fantastic. Another
That was
fantastic
good.
flick. Yeah,
Yeah,
really
and no
fantastic.
CGIs. I think that's what it is about it for me. I look
Right.
back and say, "Wow, this acting is amazing." Like, they don't have any assistants.
Mhm. Yes, yes,
But
yes.
hi, Carrie.
How do you know, Sally
Connecticut,
yeah,
no,
this
Sally
is
Jessel.
true, actually. They
Yes.
were on
I
there. That's
forgot
right.
about that, Carrie. That is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Yes, I forgot about that. But I remember
yeah.
watching the documentary.
Mhm.
Okay, now I'm gonna have nightmares. I wasn't going to mention that
The fourth kind, yeah.
because I know it's real. You can't tell me it
There's
isn't.
a lot.
Wait
There's a
till you
lot of
watch Cursed, The Cursed.
yeah, we'll have to do that. I see Laura's just getting herself together. Laura, just give
Yay.
me a heads up when you're good to go, and we'll bring you out of the green room. But
No snacks in our green room, sorry.
I know we don't have snacks. I
No
know.
Skittles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do feel that this is the Amityville Horror is one of those films that people, I think it's the story that people they can't get enough of it. They really want to know the ins and the outs. And that's something that Laura has offered to us and to everybody.
Yeah.
We're not the only interview she's ever done, but it gives a little bit of insight into a whole world that is outside of the film. What happened up to a certain point? What happened during? Because you don't unless you see the documentaries, you don't really get a whole lot of information on the seances. Um, hold
The
on
experiences of the
here.
family
Ed and
either.
Lorraine were made into movies. Read the books instead. 100%. Yeah,
Oh,
a hundred
yeah, the
percent.
demonologist book is really good.
Oh yeah,
It's
I've
all about her, and it's really well done.
yeah. No, oh yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That
So
was
there,
that was the first time I ever read about her, was that book.
yeah, I got a copy from her. I bought one at a really
Oh, isn't
early
that
age in my
nice?
life, yes, and then I got a copy from her as well.
Aw.
But, I just feel it's one of those things that you just don't know enough. Like, I would have loved to have talked to somebody from, like the entity going way back and trying to get information. Sometimes I think things are so traumatic, people just do not want to talk about it.
I think you're hit the nail on the head with that one, because she kept moving and kept suffering, but there was nothing
Mhm,
updated that I could find online about her.
mhm.
And it's really sad because, I mean, obviously they don't really use too much information, because I wonder if she's still alive. And if not, did it pass on to the next generation? Like I'm worried for her, when I
Well,
think about her.
these things have the ability to attach to multiple people, but when you're looking
Yeah.
at something on that, like, on a really personal level, I actually had a friend who went through that, and, didn't last very long because I ended up helping her, and this is long before I was involved in the paranormal, and she would message me. She's passed now, unfortunately, but back then, she would describe some of the things that were happening to her, and she was my best friend from childhood. So, I was kinda like, how does this come to be?" But as her life unfolded at that point, everything that led to that moment, they're all attributes that could attract things, into your life, and it really sucks, but it's a fact of life that sometimes, and it's not like you call it out to yourself. Sometimes things just happen, wrong place, wrong time, you pick them up, you meet somebody who maybe it piggybacks and hops on. Like, there's so many reasons as to why these things happen. I'm just going by, because I'm not going to tell everybody, this person's individual situation, but everything that she was going through in her life at the time opened a door, and
Mhm.
and something came in. And luckily, though, when she had told me about it, I was able to catch it early enough and
Yeah.
and and work with it and work with her. And with her, she just needed to change a couple of things in her life. And she had a very supportive husband. And that basically makes all the difference than being told by somebody, well, I don't believe you. That is nothing that shoots down your mindset more than somebody saying to you, I don't believe you. And because then you feel so alone that you just, you shut down because you don't want to hear it again from anybody else.
No,
So that
you
makes it
don't.
really hard. It's a battle.
Then they feel judged. It's
Mhm,
shame, it's judge, it's anything that someone would feel being violated.
mhm,
It's the same thing for them.
for sure.
It's heartbreaking when you hear them speak.
Laura, are you ready? Just nod if you are. We're good. All right. Without
Yay.
further ado, our very special guest, Miss Laura DiDio. Woo!
Hello, thank you.
Hey, gorgeous.
Oh,
How are
pleasure to have
you?
you back.
Good. How are you?
Thanks very much. I think I
Oh,
should probably, maybe I should do this in a dim light.
why? You look great.
No, I'm talking about just because it's, spooky time and
It's
what have
spooky
you.
Oh, yeah.
time. I know. I know.
Yes.
I know.
So,
I just finished doing an interview before the show tonight, and I didn't have all my light up. I'm like, oh my God. And I couldn't get up to change it. And it's like, I don't care. Spooky time. just, I'm
I
just
know
going to
because
roll
it's
with
so,
it.
it's,
So,
well, it's so bright here. So,
it,
I think it's
oh,
my screen that's low because nobody's bright to me. Everybody's just
well,
normal.
mine is really standing
yeah,
out. So are we live? Are
we
we
are
getting,
live.
Yes,
We
we
are
are.
live.
You're
Yep.
not you're not standing out on my screen. I think it's just because your walls are light. You won't find light
probably,
color walls in Michelle or my house.
probably,
No,
but all my,
Very,
my,
very well, I have
my
a few.
desk and,
there we go. There we go.
Perfect.
So we've had a lot of, good feedback, of course. This is the second time around because Laura is a fan favorite. So
Oh,
we had to bring her back, and no better time for part two than tonight, All Hallows Eve, of course. And
I
what?
didn't know.
What?
I got goosebumps. Jackie Penna wrote November 4th is the 50th anniversary of the DeFeo murders.
Oh,
I
that's
have
no, it's actually no,
goosebumps going all the way through my body right now. Ooh.
actually, that's incorrect. It was actually November 13th, not the 4th.
Okay. Wow.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
but that's still, it's coming
That's still
up.
around the
That's-
corner.
We were
Yes.
just talking about how
2 weeks.
the Amityville seems to be something that people hang on to. It's like, I don't even know, like, it doesn't even seem right to call it like a cult favorite type of thing, because usually, you know, the Manson thing was that, and there's certain things that just stick out in history that are they're never good. I mean, the Amityville, I mean, it was a tragic thing. Yet,
Well, yeah.
what is it about it? Do you think that make people hang on to it with such interest? They'll watch every movie that comes out, no matter how bad it may be. Because I feel the
there's a lot of them.
original was probably the best. We were just talking about that, but yet people won't let it go.
Well, I don't think there's any one thing. First of all, one can never predict
Right.
what is going to capture the public's attention, because arguably you have many audience members who say, I don't get it. I know of a much scarier situation than Amityville. And why didn't that become as famous? But I think it was a combination of things and a confluence of events. Number one, and I've said this a lot before, it was the times. So the early to mid 70s, the Defeo murders and the subsequent experiences of the Lutz family were preceded by 2 years of the movie The Exorcist. And to anyone who was around at that time, and this is, of course, The Exorcist happened pre Friday the 13th, all the slasher movies, blood and gore. But at the time, when people went to that movie, people who were atheists, non-believers, skeptics, people who said, oh, this doesn't scare me, they came out of that movie and were sleeping with the lights on and
right?
That's
Just
true.
like
You're not
Rosemary's
wrong.
Baby.
gripping
You're not wrong.
crucifixes, for a long time. And if you look at that movie today, it still stands the test of time.
Well,
Okay.
it was The Exorcist was based on a true story, yes, Jackie, but it was a
Of
boy.
a young man.
Yeah, it was a young man who has no recollection of it right now. Actually, Bishop James knows them and
Yes.
doesn't talk too much about them, but he did do a documentary with them.
So if you think about that, so that sets the stage. Number two, it's based in New York, in the tri-state New York metropolitan area, which was and is the communications mecca of the world.
Right.
And again, to people who are, millennials or the what do they call them, plus A's now, or A pluses? The latest ones. Okay, you have to remember that even though New York led the nation and arguably probably the world as a communications mecca, we had about 5 or 6 TV stations, 1 UHF station. There was no cable, there were no podcasts, there was no streaming media.
Oh my
There
God,
were no
UHF, I feel so old.
There were no mobile phones at the time in the early 70s. Some people didn't even have push button phones at home.
That's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
they might have had rotary dial. I mean, just look at those old 70s, TV shows. So the world was a very, different place. We did not yet have live digital ENG. You didn't have all of the satellite feeds that were readily available. Yes, there was satellites, so obviously, but you didn't have at TV stations the opportunity to just edit on the fly.
Right.
And so there was that. So and
that's true.
The other thing, and Marvin Scott, who was the Channel 5 reporter of record on this, that I worked with, he and Steve Bauman, he said it, I think, the best. He summed it up the best. Everybody loves a good ghost story.
Right.
The other thing, it had the element of that basically raised it up several notches was the tragedy of the Defeo murders.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
At the time, we were a much more religious-based society.
Mm.
Whether
Yeah,
or
more
not you
Christian.
were Catholic, Jewish, Protestant,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
think about it. Church, church going was a regular
Mm-hmm.
thing, and people believe that. And there was a huge element with the Defeo family of that
Mm-hmm.
Catholicism. And at the time, again, it wasn't really widely publicized that both sides of the family, did have connections to organized crime. Now, I'm not saying that Louise Defeo was participating or that Ronald Defeo Sr. was participating, and certainly the 4 Defeo children.
It just
Allison,
added to the element
yes,
of darkness, I suppose.
yes, and the children were all attending a Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
At the time of the murders, I mean, Butch, as he was called by family and friends, was pretty much known around town as being something of a troublemaker, a punk. He had had several encounters with the law. And there was no reason for it. He worked at the family, his paternal grandfather, Michael Briganti Sr.'s Buick dealership, along with his father. But his family gave him an allowance. They spoiled him, you name it. And in fact, he had tried to kill his father once before, but the gun jammed. That caused his father to get religion. Literally telling people, hey, I've dodged a bullet. I beat the devil. And at that point, the family would go on, spiritual retreats up to Canada.
Oh, I know.
Up to the oratories. And
yeah,
they donated a lot of money to that. So on the one hand, you've got this devoutly Catholic Italian family. And then you've got Butch Defeo, whom, and inexplicably, the father gave him back the gun.
Prodigal son.
Yeah, so he wasn't even a prodigal in that he never actually went away.
Does it make to think for a moment, destiny? Like, do you think at that point, like, if that's how you're going to go, if that's what's written for your demise, because who in their right mind would give a weapon back to someone who just tried to kill them?
Somebody who's given it back before.
Well, I think that the father thought that he was the super alpha male.
Yeah.
In the family.
It's normal.
And Butch wasn't going anywhere. He had it too good.
Right.
Somebody is asking, wasn't Defeo the first case of the devil made me do it defense?
Yeah. Good question.
No, it actually was not, to put it succinctly, because that was always William Weber.
Right.
I was going to say it wasn't even Manson.
Intent. William Weber was the defense attorney. He was like the 4th defense attorney to represent Butch. Because Butch attacked the 3 prior ones, fired them.
Hot-headed.
But when you look at those murders, you have to think what's going on. And of course, William Weber was a very capable, astute defense attorney. And he was also, I tell you, the cast of Mad Men had nothing on him when it came to marketing. He could, if he were alive today, he'd be running his own TikTok empire. I'm sure. Right. He understood the value. Weber understood.
He'd be the Rudy Giuliani of our times.
Yeah. Right. He understood the value of PR.
Yes.
But so you had all of these things come together,
Mhm.
and people do love a good ghost story. And of
They
course, it's
do.
also in the middle of winter. Anybody I spoke to in Amityville who knew Butch at the time, nobody was surprised
Mm.
that he had killed somebody. What they were surprised about was the scope of the problem. It's like if you live near Mount Vesuvius or Krakatoa,
Mhm.
you expect it's going to explode at some point, but nobody exactly knew how.
Right.
And so there was this big element, and of course it was front page on all the newspapers. Butch Defeo was arrested and charged with the murders of his entire family within about 48 hours. It
Mhm.
took one detective 10 hours to really get the confession, because he
I
had
think,
been making up so many stories, but
yeah.
never at any time in that initial 48 hours from the
Mm.
time of the murders was he suggesting that the devil made him do it. In fact, probably the most truthful he ever was. And any police official, law enforcement official will tell you, you're going to get the best truth as it comes out of their mouths right at the time.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
Yes.
his explanation, and everybody's heard this finally, and he described each one of what he did in each one of the murders.
Mhm.
He went into the parents' room first, shot his father twice. The mother was always going to be collateral damage because she was lying right next to the father in bed. So the mother, Louise Briganti Defeo, was also shot twice, and they
Mm.
died pretty quickly. He
Mhm.
went across the room, shot the two brothers, and he stood there. The one brother had had a football injury. He was the youngest one.
Mhm.
And so he was using a wheelchair or crutches, and he couldn't really move. And he was also found, face down in his bed. But
Mm.
when Butch shot him, it was one shot, close range, from a
Mhm.
33 caliber Marlin rifle, no silencer on the rifle.
Mhm.
And he stood
That's a
there and
big
watched
question.
the youngest brother was shot in the spine, and he stood there
Aw.
watching while he twitched. The other sister, who was 13, Allison, she was in the room next door to them.
Mhm.
She was shot in the head, and these were pretty horrific murders,
Yeah.
close up with a
Yes.
high-powered rifle.
Mhm.
Then he went upstairs to the third floor bedroom where his sister Dawn, who was 18, and shot her. So what nobody could ever explain was that none of the family were drugged.
Mhm.
There was no drugs in their system.
Mhm.
And the best book on the murders themselves is this one, High Hopes.
High hopes.
Mhm.
Yes. And this was written by Gerard Sullivan, who was the lead prosecutor, and his co-writer was Harvey Aronson, who is still around. Harvey Aronson was a Pulitzer Prize winning editor at New York Newsday. And what's really telling is this last page in the book here. And
Mhm.
I'll just read it to the audience, because Gerard Sullivan at the time was a fairly young prosecutor. He had daughters who were teens. So this really hit home for him. And he
Mhm.
said, I still think about the DeFeo case, especially about the children. And I wonder about the questions that were never answered. Did any of the victims wake up? If so, why didn't any of them defend themselves? Why were all 6 found face down in death? Why didn't anyone hear the shots?
That's the big question. This is what
And
we
so
touched on a bit.
this is what is coming from a law enforcement official after the fact. So he would have said if they were drugged, there would have been,
Yes.
so there were no drugs in the system.
That all would have come out. Yeah.
That would have come out in the thing. But my question is, do we know absolutely for sure that they were not moved or rolled over onto their faces? Because he could have asked them to go face down. And in that fear, a child would just listen to their brother. Not,
But the parents, the father, I think, would have went the other way. He would have went guns blazing.
There wasn't enough time. Okay. There were suggestions. I will say this. There were suggestions, and there have been persistent rumors, if you will, that, the father was shot in the hallway and he moved his body. Well, the father weighed over 260
No, I don't think
pounds.
I don't think he moved it like that much.
No. But that was one of the claims.
Wow.
That the father was shot in the hallway. Now, first of all, if you get if you shoot somebody close up with a rifle,
it would have been all over.
You're going to lose. There would have been blood all over. There was no way he could have cleaned it up by himself, nor could he have dragged his father, put his father back in bed.
Because the splatter would have come forward and back and up. But that's what I wonder. I wish I could see the crime scene photos. That sounds terrible, right?
Unfortunately, if somebody really wants to go into it, you can find the photos of the crime scenes.
For the forensics, yes, for the forensics part of it, because I wonder what CSI was like then and now, because of technology.
Well, I think what happened was the father did, when somebody shoots you, I mean, his body would have jerked.
Yes.
And he looks like he started to get up to raise himself with his elbow. But there was no time. This all happened, these murders took place within the span of about 10 to 15 minutes. This was not a protracted event.
So
nobody heard it. Go ahead.
Here's another question pertaining to Don, because we know that Ron, he hopscotched around a lot in his story. And one of the stories was that Don was the mastermind behind it and came home late, that she wasn't actually in bed, and that, she was aware of it and she got him to do it. And in the end, she got it anyway. So what are your thoughts on that? Have you heard anything about that? Because that guy just flip-flopped around so much. It's hard to know in the end what the heck really happened pertaining to him.
The best account, I think, was what he told the detective at the time, which was he had been drinking, he had smoked pot, he had gone over to a friend's house, a woman, and gotten some heroin. So he had that, but who knows what kind of tolerance he had to it, because he was drinking and drugging and partying quite a bit. So it's not the same as if you and I suddenly decided, let me take my that first snort of cocaine or something like that.
Right, of course.
But we don't know what kind of a tolerance he built up to it.
No, or how long. Yeah.
But he had been he had been abusing substances, drugs, alcohol, you name it, for quite some time. However,
his toxicity in his blood must have been really high.
Yes. However, let's look at the story. It doesn't make sense.
No.
First of all, women who kill don't usually use guns unless you're Bonnie Parker or,
Yes.
Or
high testosterone.
In the military or law enforcement. That wouldn't be the drug of choice. Dawn was living at home. She was going to secretarial school. She didn't have the beef with her parents
that he had
to the degree that he had. I'm sure
it
we
doesn't
all
make any sense.
have contretemps and disagreements and arguments with our parents. But so that doesn't sound right. And she's the 18-year-old mastermind. Ronnie Butch Defeo Jr. positioned himself as an alpha male. Again, this guy walked around like,
Mhm.
a barnyard cock.
Right.
Just I'm the
Yes.
leader of my pack, and he used to buy his friends off because he had money, a
Mhm.
car, a boat. He,
Mhm.
flashed that
Mhm.
around. So nobody was going to tell him what to do. He had
Mhm.
also gotten into several fist fights with his father. They'd fight on the side lawn. They would fight in the house.
Mhm.
So no, there was no way that an 18-year-old is going to be telling her 23-year-old brother what to do in
Right.
this situation. He told so many stories, it wasn't funny. He did say that he killed his father, but Dawn killed the other kids, and that's why he killed Dawn. That was one of the many things he told. But again, this guy changed his story more often than we changed our
So even if it
underwear.
was the fact, he discredited himself so many times. So could we just look at a supernatural aspect then for a moment, which possibly may predate the Lutzes, a story that came out, in the midst of the whole Lutz story. But was there, do we think that there may have been something in the house at that point because there was stories of Indian burial grounds and an Indian chief who, like, or I don't like to say necessarily Indian, but it's the term they were using at the time, but indigenous chief that was on site. Do we think that did that come into play at all? Like, do we
Maybe.
think maybe that may have been a factor of the not hearing anything?
I'll tell you, Ed and Lorraine Warren thought that it was sort of a demonic fugue that came over these people, and that's why. That was their explanation.
Got it.
There was a lot that went on. First of all, the stories, the quote unquote stories about Native Americans being buried on the property is not a story. That's backed up by fact.
Perfect. Okay, good.
Okay, I
That
got
helps.
those records out of the Amityville Historical Society when I did all the original research.
So that's bad
Excellent.
juju right off the bat.
Well,
Right.
not
To be so
necessarily. I mean, they did find there was, and it was right where they found it because it was reported in the newspapers that they
Yes.
found the bodies of 4 Native Americans, and one was in a standing position, which usually denotes a chief. But when you
Yes.
say burial ground, you have to think this is not like one of those Western movies like Jeremiah Johnston
Right.
with
No.
Yeah.
Robert
No.
Redford, where, we won't go into
No. It's just a
burial ground.
burial. It can
Because
constitute one or more. Right.
but the second part about the angry chief, that came from another aspect, and that was when that came from Hans Holzer when I went into the house in January 1977 with Hans Holzer and his deep trance medium,
She was
Ethel
incredible.
Johnson Myers.
Mhm.
Yeah, she was
And
incredible.
yeah, well, she was a former opera singer, by the way. But
Oh,
so when she went in and went into a trance, she was channeling this Native American person who said that some kids had found his skull and were kicking it around like a football,
Mm.
and that made him angry. There was also the story that a man named John Ketchum, who
yes.
lived in the area right up the block from them, but a couple of 100 years earlier,
Mm.
that he had come down from Massachusetts and had been a warlock.
So that's where the catch 'em, kill 'em
That,
comes
yeah,
from.
there's a blend right there.
Oh, I
Okay,
got
but
goosebumps
no
everywhere.
evidence. There's no
Yes.
evidence that this John Ketchum had anything to do with the occult.
Okay.
However, I think when you have somebody, let's face it, who is on drugs
Mm-hmm.
and who is evil
Mm-hmm.
and they attract a certain energy.
Absolutely.
So whatever, and I am not a psychiatrist or a psychoanalyst, but there's something very off with this guy.
It's a
And
mix.
Yeah,
It's not a good mix.
I
No,
was going to ask you,
Eventually.
was there a psych eval? What they find?
they found him fit to stand trial.
But that
It-
doesn't
it's-
mean he's not mentally
No, well,
he's
there's
mentally
something-
stable.
well, I think we can all agree that it's not normal. And there's another
Mm.
No.
book out there if anybody wants to try and get their hands on it, which is an excellent book. It's called Horrific Homicides, and it's
Mhm.
by Judge Thomas Stark, who has
Mm.
also since passed away. And he talks about his most famous cases, and he devotes several chapters to Ronald Defeo and Amityville, the late Ronald Defeo. He passed away. He's gone now
Yeah.
three and a half years.
Passed away in prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, he passed away in prison. But he said it was his most notorious criminal trial.
Well,
Mhm.
you think
And
about how
he-
many trials do we have in history that actually have murdered their entire family?
And at first, nobody could really pinpoint a reason.
No.
But I think the motive, if you will, ended up being greed. And Ronald Defeo Jr., Butch, when the detective asked him, what happened when you actually did this? He says, I don't know. He says, I just started shooting and then everything happened so fast and I just couldn't stop, which seems to me that's the most truthful thing he said.
Yes.
Now, you and I can be, and I don't drink or smoke and I've, never done drugs,
Mm.
but I cannot imagine, even if you're in a state where it's high, I mean, you'd have to be on some serious
Mhm.
hallucinogenic drugs
Mhm. Mhm.
to be propelled to kill someone. And if you were in that state, he had to walk up several flights of stairs there, 2
Mhm.
flights of stairs from the second floor to
Yeah.
the third floor. So it doesn't square if he was that under the influence, number one, that he could shoot straight. Number two, that he could give commands to his brothers and sisters to lay down and stay down.
And reload.
Or
No,
walk.
and
period.
he was one person. And don't
Yeah.
forget, if he was
Yes.
in one room, if he's in the parents' room, why wouldn't at least his three of the
Why
four
didn't they
siblings
hear
gotten up
something and why didn't they scatter? Why didn't they that I think
or scream?
exactly. I think we could we can all relate to the fact that yes, he was highly unstable. This happened and it was a tragedy. But when you're looking at the mysterious part of it, it's like nobody heard anything. The dog didn't react. The
I was
neighbors
just
didn't react.
The dog
thinking
did
that the
react.
dog, no.
The dog did react.
Oh, the dog was
So-
the only one reacting.
Somebody complained about the barking, but they didn't look to see what was going
No,
on.
they didn't. What happened was the
Dog
dog,
was reacting.
the Old English sheepdog, was tied up outside. And
Right.
for that 15 to 20 minutes, that dog was out there howling and
Because
barking.
animals can hear and see what people like into the ether, so to speak, which would
And
make
by the
sense
way,
that
those
he knew.
The shotgun blasts, okay,
Those are loud.
yes, not only would it have been loud with no silencer, but they were right on the water.
Yeah.
So that
Even
would
though he was
echo
in the
like
house, that echoes.
Yes, it
bounced.
does. It does.
But to your point, if you are on drugs,
Mm.
like that, you have psychotic tendencies or, whatever, as
Mhm.
he did, murderous intent,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
very easy if you're going on the possession theory,
Right.
for evil to get in and work on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, easily.
I theoretically, you have to think, well, what differentiates a Ronald Defeo Jr. from other serial killers, John Wayne Gacy,
Mm.
Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson?
Oh, Manson didn't touch
What's-
anyone though.
Mhm.
But
No,
well, we
I'm
don't
laughing
know.
because that was his defense. I didn't kill anyone. No, but you orchestrated it all.
Well,
Yeah.
and but there was clearly intent. But going back
Yeah.
to a motive there,
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Defeo Jr. had basically robbed $20,000, stolen $20,000. He was making a bank deposit for the Buick dealership,
Business.
where he
Yes.
Yeah.
worked as sort of
Yes.
a, general
Mhm.
factotum, making
Yeah.
deliveries, because they couldn't trust him with anything of any responsibility. So he and another
Mhm.
guy went out, supposed
Yeah.
to make this bank deposit, 20,000 in cash, and they come back three hours later and say, we were robbed. Well, the father knew
Wow.
that
Mm.
that wasn't true because he started spending money like a drunken sailor, etc.
And
Plus,
that was a
there
lot of
was
money then.
plus the
Mhm.
parents allegedly, this is another big thing nobody ever found, had $100,000 in cash in the house, jewelry. What happened to all of that? And we know from the grandfather's Buick dealership being robbed that,
Yes.
guess what? Because the grandfather, was not being robbed, but at the same time this was happening, the Southern District of New York and Brooklyn DA's office had a wiretap going on the Buick dealership for certain
Oh,
activities there.
yeah.
And when the Amityville police and the Suffolk County DA got wind of this, they approached them and said, hey, could we listen to those tapes? We don't want to interfere with your investigation. We're not going to leak anything. We just want to know what might have been said, if anything, about the murders. And Michael Briganti Sr. was talking to one of his associates at the Buick dealership, and it was very telling. He says, the associate said, the kid knows a lot about our business. What are we going to do if he gets acquitted?
Yes.
And the grandfather was very distraught. And in time like
Oh,
this, by the way,
crap.
again, the religious element comes up, because when he testified in court, the grandfather made a point of saying, I am a practicing Catholic. I go to mass every Sunday, and I go to confession, and I take communion at least once a month.
Well, even Michael Corleone was baptizing his nephew.
Yes.
When it all
Yes,
happened.
So Ronald Defeo Jr. grew up around religion. And in fact, even in his sort of twisted sense of mores, and I think he was amoral, he said to the cops, and he said, I think on the witness stand, he says, well, I never hit a sister, meaning sister as in nun, not sister as in his sibling. So in his mind, that was a code of honor. So he grew, he had all of this symbolism around him. And of course, everybody remembers the picture of the statues on the front lawn, the statues in the house. So this was a church-going family. So you can say, there's this tug of war with good versus evil. So he certainly had the symbolism around, and if his conscience was altered by the substance abuse, that would be enough to really
That would be enough. It would be enough.
tip him over the edge. And whether or not he was actually possessed, as in what we're thinking of Reagan, played by Linda Blair in The Exorcist, or whether
I don't know if it's ever that extreme. It doesn't have to be. It could be somebody just stepping in behind you and playing with what's up here and directing you, to do certain things. It doesn't have to be a full on possession by any means, but
something was going on there. And so certainly from a media perspective, I mean, nobody could figure it out at the time.
Well,
the parents I don't know how he even thought he could get away with these things. And I'm not sure if he planned in advance to kill them.
I could tell you this. I could tell you in many situations of families that I've helped, there have been a certain percentage that have said, Because I've dealt with families who've had like the whole entity thing going on where one spouse is being attacked and the other spouse is like, I was dead asleep, didn't hear a thing. And when the person being attacked looks over and going like, help me, like, why aren't you doing
Yeah,
something?
and it's common.
And they're being physically assaulted. There's no the other person in the same bed. They're sucked down so deep that but where that was a supernatural thing at the time, so it's like that's why I asked, was there a supernatural undertone that put people into such a sound sleep that there's just no way, like something in the air that just
That's what I said. Ed and Lorraine
yeah,
Warren felt like there was this demonic feud.
yes,
And you
right,
know what? I'll tell you, in the absence of any empirical data or
Mm,
facts,
yes, of course,
that's as good an explanation as any, whether or not you believe it. When what I just read, that paragraph
Mhm.
from
yes,
Gerard Sullivan, the lead prosecutor, prosecutor
Mhm.
in the case, saying there were things about it that they couldn't figure out, and that was one of them. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering even how high, how his high ran off, because DeFeo was able to tell the police
Mhm.
within that first 24-hour period,
Mhm.
36 hours, of what he had done after that. He cleaned his clothes,
Mhm.
took off his bloodied clothes, took a shower, put the stuff in a bag, basically took the gun apart, drove
Mhm.
out of the house, and he told them where he stashed his clothes. He threw the gun back in the river there, the
Mhm.
creek behind the house, threw the clothes down a sewer, and they
Mhm.
found it just where he said. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
a big one.
Mhm.
yeah. So whether or not you want to say, and by the way, Judge Thomas Stark rejected any insanity defense.
Right.
And in
Yeah.
his, what I find interesting is that the chapters that deal with Ronald DeFeo Jr. and the trial in his book, Horrific Homicides, he calls him the antisocial son. And I had interviewed Judge Stark and I said, not to be disrespectful, Judge, but I have to say, to me, antisocial is somebody who goes to a party, sits in a corner, and doesn't want to talk to anybody
Mhm.
or becomes a hermit. It's not somebody who's basically
Mhm.
a mass murderer.
Mhm.
But I think that there was certainly, I think, that Catholic element there. And interestingly, DeFeo Jr. never seemed to have any remorse
Mhm.
for his crimes.
Mhm.
And between 1975 and 1984, he kept launching appeals. All of them were unsuccessful. But
Mhm.
the judge at the time he sentenced Ronnie DeFeo Jr. said, I hope that whoever comes after me, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was sentenced to 6 consecutive
Life sentences.
sentences of 25 to life.
Mhm.
And the judge said, I hope he never gets out because I think he will be a danger to society, whether or not
Mhm.
it's now or 25 or 35 years from
Mhm.
now. And
Mhm.
he never did get out. And he
Mm.
Yeah.
basically spent the rest of his life
Mhm.
entertaining any reporters who wanted to make the trek up to see him,
Mhm.
Oh, he was probably
and getting
lonely.
married a couple of times. And
Yeah.
even then, the story about how he was supposedly married to that woman Geraldine, and that was all
Mhm.
concocted. And then there
Yeah.
was another psychic who visited him in jail, and I found that laughable.
Mhm.
So, and he was actually at the end, I mean, using the
Mhm.
stories and the questions that the reporters were raising in various treatments, documentaries, news stories, and using each one of those to spin the tale. How could I do this? How could I, as one person, kill 6 people?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody moved. Well, that's what we were all wondering. So yeah, that part of it, I have to say that's just
That's going to be the one, like one of those major questions that it will never get an answer. It'll always be that's one of the reasons that this story hangs on, because not all of the questions have been answered. And then, you have the Lutzes that come in with a whole myriad of craziness besides that. So, we touched a lot on that in part 1 with the Lutzes, but we didn't touch on everything that was happening to them in the house. There's so much information, it's hard to remember it all. And of course, all you have to go on is the books and the movies. So what really went on? Did George go off his nut at the same time at 3:15 every morning? Were the flies infesting the house? Because I know you mentioned that the priest did have an experience in there as well. So some of it, there was something going on in that house.
Yes. The priest, Father Ray Pecoraro, I did meet and speak with him at Kathy's mother's house when the Lutzes were staying there, and asked him to his face. He was a very quiet man, and I asked him to his face. I said, "Did you really hear the voice of a disembodied entity telling you to get out? And did something smack you in the face?" And he said, "Yes, that did happen."
See, right there. That's a curiosity. That's a curiosity.
Well, there's a lot of curious things about this, because of course, once the Lutzes gave that press conference with William Weber in January, that hit the local news. And then people were looking for them and trying to find them, but nobody knew that they had gone to live with Kathy's mother. Today, they would be, and George was still going to work. So he just wasn't answering phone calls. Today, with all the communications that we have, the kids would be staked. The reporters would be staking out the kids' schools, following them home,
Oh my gosh,
offering
drones.
bribe money. So they couldn't.
Yeah.
But, one of the things, when I went out to speak to the Lutzes, when I finally got in touch with them and they called me back, it was on a Saturday. I didn't tell my office that they had called me back, because I figured, oh, well, I'm just a lowly news assistant. My career is going to be over before it gets started. if I say, well, I called them, but they won't talk to us. So it was better to not to let them know that I had spoken to them. But when I arrived at them at the office, that's where I met them, out at George Lutz's family business, the William Parry Surveying Company. And what happened was George was always very tense and uptight. It's sort of like a wire that you thought was going to snap at any minute. Kathy was very, very sweet, very soft-spoken. She was just a lovely person. But when I actually spoke to them, it was like pulling teeth to get the story out of them. And I spent 6 hours with them that first afternoon. And they didn't want to, George, you could say he might have been cagey in trying to evade questions. Kathy sat there, hunched over like this, and she spoke very low. I literally, even though I was only 2 feet from her, had to lean forward to strain to hear what she was saying, but to get out of them what had actually happened, you know,
Do you think she
was
was afraid of George? Do you think she was a little bit leery about speaking?
no,
Out of
it wasn't
story.
that at that time. Certainly George was the more dominant personality,
Right, right.
but in bits and pieces, they started to tell the story. And what struck me and what I've written here, in all of my notes and my forthcoming book, was that these people were genuinely terrified. Now, if they were faking it,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then they missed Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is like listening to Robert De Niro or Meryl Streep or, whatever they were giving an Academy Award performance.
It sounds like they were
Um,
just grabbed and sort of gagged and say, do as, like I say, maybe this William Weber had something to do with that.
well,
And
yeah, I don't know, but when I finally did, I said, well, what happened? I needed something concrete.
Mm,
And they said that they felt that was a negative force. And according to, I'm looking at my original notes,
mhm,
according to George and Kathy, the house was not haunted by the spirits of the dead Defeos, but rather by some strong negative force that was not confined to the house and the property, and that
mm,
could reach out and follow them wherever they went.
mhm,
So,
Really?
in addition, at that point, George had told me that he had a psychic friend of his, he didn't mention who, that had gone through the house and sensed the presence of various demons, as well as a gnome that inhabited the fireplace.
hate
Okay, and
gnomes.
he said there were
I knew that was
allegedly,
coming. Michelle
well, that
hates
one,
them.
I hate
okay, that
gnomes.
one hadn't been
Sorry.
played up.
Go. Right.
Uh,
Okay.
this is his words, not mine.
No, I was
Okay,
just playing.
he
No,
said,
no, we were just laughing at it. That's all.
he
Not
said
at that, at Michelle.
he said there were allegedly spirits of people who had lived on the land hundreds of years ago, and not all of these presences meant harm, but apparently, it was the overwhelmingly negative force, which
Mhm,
he did not characterize as demonic. In fact, he got very angry when when we went into the house the first time with Ed and Lorraine prior to the seance, when Steve Bauman used the term demonic
mhm,
in the thing. So among the things, so you're asking, I said, well, what happened? What actually happened to you in there?
mhm,
So among the things that he said happened were doors ripped off the hinges. We saw no evidence of that, nor did we see any repair bills.
mhm,
So subtle personality changes in the family. Everybody had short tempers. There was a lot of violence among the members of the family. It was commonplace.
mhm.
George told me that he and Kathy took wooden spoons to the kids and beat them with it one night and ordered them around to march around like drill sergeants.
Hmm.
Kathy told me that Chris and Danny, her two sons, who were 9 and 7 at the time, brought home a playmate one afternoon. The boy had remained with his coat on in the foyer and finally left after only a half an hour and never came back. Kathy said her sister-in-law gravitated to the playroom when she visited and seemed to revert to a childlike state. Kathy also said that the house worked differently on women than it did men. So
Interesting.
she said men seem to be infested or infused with more violent reactions.
That's
Well,
interesting.
Kathy said women, including herself, were initially very charmed by the house and overcome by a feeling of sort of lassitude, oh, that's
Mm,
nice.
mhm,
Kathy and George both said that the longer they stayed there, the less they felt like leaving the house to go visiting or even do ordinary everyday chores such as shopping. They also said that their sex life became non-existent after they moved into the house, which might be a little odd for two healthy 29-year-old, 30-year-old people. They said that the boathouse was a source of poltergeist activity. And George said he went out one night to go to the boathouse, I guess, to look for something. And he found green slime all over the place, which oozing. And he dubbed it poltergeist puke.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't see any of that. He also said that Harry, the family dog, who was a Labrador mix, it was a young dog, spent a lot of time sleeping. And by the way, George also said that on one occasion, the dog nearly strangled himself on his chain trying to climb over the fence and get off the property. And he said other animals wouldn't go on the property. Now, this I can debunk, okay, because Danny told me that the reason the dog almost hanged himself had nothing to do with him trying to get off the property because he was scared, but because he was on a short chain and it got hung up on the chain link fence. So he accidentally got hooked on there. And I did see cats and squirrels.
Yeah, that would cause them to run. Yeah.
Yes.
Then the other thing, and this was a big part, this was depicted quite a bit in the movie, was that George said he could never get warm in the house. He was constantly building roaring fires. I don't know what that did to the gnome, but and he said he spent most of his
burn him up.
He spent most of his time staring into the fire, and he, stopped showering, shaving, etc. Kathy also said she felt a strong presence in the kitchen, and that was backed up by Danny when I interviewed him for the 2012-2013 documentary My Amityville Horror, which was directed and produced by Eric Walter. And Danny said at the time he and his mother were sitting in the kitchen having breakfast, and they felt a presence in the kitchen, and they both felt like something had gone through them. Like whoosh, literally physically went through them in and out. So that's pretty dramatic. And then, of course, Kathy also said that she famously, this has been reported quite a bit, that she looked in the mirror one day, and instead of seeing her 29-year-old face, what she saw was the face of an old hag looking back at her. Then there were the flies that were supposedly congregating in the window of the upstairs sewing room. And so there was that. And George said that after they moved into the house, he found out that he was being audited by the IRS. Well, so he was trying to link everything in his life to the house. By the way, he had also told me that the Defeo's maid had a breakdown and was going into a mental institution. Well, he was talking about.
There was a maid.
Well,
I didn't know.
It was actually, the woman's name was Lynn Nonowitz. She passed away some years back. She was a very close friend of Louise Defeo's. I wouldn't call her a maid in the traditional sense.
Okay, understood.
She did go over to help Louise out. I mean, actually, when you think there's 5 kids, husband, etc. So she would go over and help Louise out, cleaning a few times a week, help her with the laundry, etc. She was very close to Louise. She was on the witness stand at the Ronnie Defeo Jr.'s trial. She was clearly very upset. So I think she did go someplace to decompress, but it was not like she was committed and was in a straitjacket. So that would be a mischaracterization. But what they said was, and anybody who believes in the paranormal will find this, correlates to infestation, that at first things were very subtle and disconnected in terms of what was happening. But they said after January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany, when they took down all the Christmas decorations, all hell broke loose. So the activity ramped up. George said he would wake up every night at 3:15, which was the approximate time of the Defeo murders, as he believed it. So all of these incidents, and of course there are more, were told to me over the span of 5 or 6 hours that afternoon. And
Wow.
George was, again, he was really wired pretty tightly. He'd start to say something, he'd stop, and he'd clam up. And he wasn't the type of guy that you could push like a 60 minutes interview or interrogation.
Yeah, but why was he doing that? Was he showing signs of being deceptive or couldn't remember his story?
No, well, how do you know if he's being deceptive? First of all, you're listening to this person
prove any of that.
who basically, when George fell silent, then Kathy would say something. And again, she spoke very slowly, very softly. It was almost inaudible. Okay. And her position when she told the story didn't change. She was leaning forward, like this, almost, trying to, hug herself or protect herself.
So it sounds like PTSD a little bit.
Yeah. And at certain points, I would always ask them to go back over certain things to clarify them, because it wasn't clear. I wasn't sure I heard right. But what it sounded, and what my impression then that I have in all of my writing is that, and this is what made it so unbelievable and makes it so unbelievable to many people who are skeptics today, is that they had described, it sounded like they had been visited, and this is my exact quote that I wrote down at the time, by just about every form of parapsychological plague in existence.
Wow.
And, I had to say, even sitting there as, 19, 20 years old that I was, and even though I believe in hauntings and possession, etc., my personal beliefs were being very strained because of all of this. Usually it's one or two or three things.
Right.
And that made me uneasy, because I'm thinking, okay, Monday morning, I'm going to have to go into Channel 5 and tell my news director all this stuff. But, by the way, I knew that wasn't going to stop them from airing the story. On the contrary, if anything, it was going to make them more eager to do it, because it was a ratings bonanza, whether or not the Lutzes were proven to be frauds or whether there was really something there.
It's a win-win for the news station any way you look at it. And the fact that all of these famous people started coming around, of course, the seances, the big one, and the famous photograph that was captured. Has anyone ever
The little
determined
ghost boy?
Yes, who looked a whole lot like one of the Defeo boys, but if it was something malevolent in the house, it could have been mimicking that image as well.
Actually, the photo didn't look like either Chris or Danny.
It didn't. Oh, so
No.
who was it?
It looked like...
No, you said Defeo.
The Defeo, or Defeo boy.
No, I didn't really think it looked like one of them or the Lutz boys.
Interesting.
The photo looked like Paul Bartz almost, who was the assistant that accompanied Ed and Lorraine Warren, one of their assistants.
Kidding.
That
Oh,
night.
so just a young guy who just just stick his head out at the wrong time and not
I don't know. I mean, but
not
Paul
come
Bartz,
forward?
Yeah, Paul Bartz was wearing a plaid shirt, and in the photo, that little ghost boy, and people ask about the little ghost boy photo all the time.
Yes.
It's very popular.
Okay, I cannot vouch for its authenticity, and I can't say that it was faked, because in order to do so, prove it with any beyond the shadow of a doubt, I would have had to have been there when the photo was developed. I
Correct.
would like to see the negative. And
Exactly.
that is owned by, all of that is owned by the photographer that
And there was
the
no way of getting a hold of
Warrens
that.
He
had
never
employed
sold
that
it.
night.
I know.
But
Right.
He
at the
never sold it. That's telling.
Yeah, but it's all over the net. And what happened was
Yeah.
years later, and this part I really don't like about George, because George Lutz did some very shady things.
Hmm.
He had called up, we had a conference call with Ed and Lorraine and myself after the book, the Amityville Horror book by Jay Anson, was published. And George said, "Hey, all of you have been so helpful to us. I want to do an Amityville picture book. And we'll share in the profits with all of, with you, because you helped us out so much." So as part of that, he asked Ed and Lorraine if he could borrow all the photographs from that night, because he never went back into the house, according to what he told us.
Right.
And so they loaned him the photos. And time went on, and they had the negatives, of course, but Lorraine asked him for the photos back. And he says, "Oh, I copyrighted them."
Oh. Ouch.
Who would do that? Well, first of all, by the way,
Yeah.
that's a big fallacy.
Mhm.
Okay, it was a big fat lie. He had never copyrighted them.
Mhm.
But
Well, it would
number
have to be
two-
in your contract when you hired him that you couldn't have them. So yeah, you're right.
Well, he not only never copyrighted them, but he wouldn't have been able to do so by law.
No.
No,
The
they weren't his
copyright
pictures.
resided with the original photographer.
Correct.
Yes.
We just
So-
have to. Can you hold that thought? We just have to do a station and sponsor ID, or we get. I know.
It's so good.
This is the work part of the
I'm
interview.
gonna turn some of the lights down here.
Okay.
Oh,
Put you back.
perfect. Okay. Wow.
Go Bubbles.
What first happened? I am just like so into this. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 107.7 FM radio, as well as on the Gulf Coast on 105.3 FM radio. We're live on Roku TV, Rumble, YouTube, and X. You heard me, X at Michelle Desrochers. And Facebook group pages, all of them that we can actually get to work today. Just saying.
How's that? There's an orb behind me. Actually, that's just my stained glass lamp, but it's more.
Okay. All right.
I just got to finish.
Amelia. Yeah,
listen to us on Alexa Prime and approximately 250 streaming platforms. You count them. I'm just saying. I bet you can find us anywhere. Search United Public Radio on the platform you normally stream on, and then look for The Outer Realm. Our guest and our dear, dear friend, Laura DiDio, is here, award-winning journalist. And she also, which everybody knows her for, because she's so amazing with giving us all the details that we want on Amityville, but there's other places that she has seen and witnessed and been a part of as well. So hopefully we'll get more of that on the other part, unless Michelle has a part trois.
No, we're just going through with this.
Okay.
There'll be a whole other show. Won't be a part of this.
That's what I mean. Okay. So
Yeah.
there's a whole part three. Okay. The gratitude portion of the show, and the most important part, Folgers Coffee. Thank you so much for sponsoring us from our first episode with UPRN and Joe Montaldo. Thank you so much. He's a producer and network owner. Thank you for your continued support. And we hope that this is a long, long relationship. Our fabulous banner and promo media is courtesy of Steve McGinnis. He is a horror illustrator and an artist. And he also creates custom commissioned pieces. If you're interested, he can be found on Facebook. Thank you so much, Steve. Our intro is courtesy of Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, award-winning composer, vocalist, and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp. Stream on any platform. Find Dr. Snick on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Justin. This is your month. It really is. Lastly, if you are watching this episode right now on any platform, wherever you are, if there is a like, a subscribe, a notifications button, a join us button, smash it right now so you never miss a show. Kindly share us with your friends and family and help us grow on social media so we can continue bringing the best in their fields.
And also people on Rumble. I see all of you are viewing. Just know that we can see your comments and questions. If you want to put them up, we will put them up here on the soundboard, and our guest, the lovely Laura DiDio, will be happy to address them. And I know there's quite a few of you in there, so thank you. Anyway, all right.
Great, Laura.
Yeah. Back to the crazy. it's and I say that, you know, with a lot of respect, because it seems to be a melee of a whole lot of things. But it seems as though, like a lot of things, that somehow Georgia's trying to capitalize on this. And do you feel, of course, that that would take away from the credibility of their experiences?
Well, it could, depending upon the person. Let's face it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what he was doing from the beginning, and I have that in my notes from that first time that I spoke to them, he had a tape recorder there and was taking notes. He was more well equipped than I was. And when the Warrens came that night, or, you know, when I was at that, he was constantly taking notes and taping conversations. As a matter, and that came into play later when they decided to contact Jay Anson at Prentice Hall. They never met Jay Anson face to face. They gave him 47 hours worth of tapes from all these people. So one could say, I mean, it depends upon how you want to spin it. On the surface, if one was planning to do a big media push, books, movies, TV shows, certainly that would be helpful. But on the other hand, okay, you look at somebody like myself, who's a reporter. Every reporter, you know, court stenographers.
But your
cetera,
information
lawyers.
is confidential, isn't it? Like, they can't just put that in a book without your permission. That's just your work. You're protected to a degree, are you not?
No, actually, if you look at Jay Anson's original book, when that showed up at the Channel 5 newsroom a couple of years later, and I vividly recall Steve Bauman and Marvin Scott standing there looking at this and saying, "This should have been our book."
Right.
And you couldn't do anything about it.
Well, no, our book, in that we should have written the book and made the millions that this was going to make, because at that point we knew that there was a movie deal in the works. But what happened was Jay Anson said this was based on a true story, and he took a lot of literary license to the point where he posted an entire conversation supposedly with that Steve Bauman and Marvin Scott had said that this was the most haunted and scary place they'd ever been in. And they never said any such thing. In fact, Marvin had been and is to this day a skeptic. So they were suing. They were going to sue Anson for having misinformation, for libeling them.
Right.
For libeling them, misquote, putting them in there and, just making something up that they had never said. And the only thing that stopped the libel suit was that Jay Anson had an untimely death. He died in 1980.
That's very interesting.
So, yes, a lot of people that were connected to Amityville, died young, but some are still around.
So interesting.
Yes.
So can I ask you this just off non sequitur, just quick, and we can come right back to it. Did any of those people that you were in touch with ever report having things happen to them after being in that house?
No, you mean some of the people that I worked with and
Yeah, who had been
besides,
there, or anybody that you know of who had these untimely deaths? Do you know if anything like Jay Anson? I mean, he would have been very connected with the Lutzes, and if the Lutzes felt that something had followed them, I wonder if he had had any odd experiences.
well, he was never in the house.
No,
He
but
wrote
if
that.
things were
Yeah.
followed, because things can follow, and the Lutzes seemed to feel whatever was there followed them, I tend to wonder if he was spending time at all with the Lutzes, if something might have piggybacked, and if he was having experiences to contribute. I'm just a shot in the dark, but it is a curiosity.
Well, the two people who said that the house almost killed them were Ed and Lorraine Warren. They
That's
said they were
true. Lorraine
followed.
told me that herself.
They
Yes.
were followed home.
Yes.
Something was
Yes.
following them home in their car from Long
Yes.
Island to Connecticut,
Yeah.
Mm.
and they
Yes.
almost went off the road in a ditch.
It's in their book.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in their book.
Lorraine, I'll tell you what I find very telling. Okay, for anybody who says, okay, they were making this up. Shortly before Lorraine died, I mean, I had a long phone conversation with her, and I said, Lorraine, what was the scariest case you ever had? And I thought she might say the Enfield poltergeist,
Mm-hmm.
the Smurl case, the Conjuring House, etc. She says, no, Amityville. And she kept repeating. She never deviated from
She
her
never
original
wavered from that.
stance.
No.
That she said that was as close to hell as I ever want to get. Obviously, if I tell you, oh, Michelle, Amelia, I have a splitting migraine,
Mm.
you have to take my word for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You don't know if I'm having a migraine
Mm-hmm.
or a spasm in my back or
Mhm.
what have you. So you do have to take certain things on faith. But I can't imagine that in a private conversation between
No, I can't see that.
myself and Lorraine,
Mm-hmm.
that she would
No.
still be repeating that. And it was the same thing with Kathy Lutz.
Mhm.
Years later, when I spoke to her, long after she and George were divorced,
Mm-hmm.
she said to me, no, I know this was real. I don't care what anybody says. I know what happened to me.
Yeah. I've always heard she is a kind and good-hearted person, that she wouldn't make up anything. Like, that's all I've ever heard about her. Anyone who's met her or knew her spoke of her, always spoke of her, you know, having
Mhm.
integrity and the fear that she expressed.
Yes.
You know, and Lorraine, I think people want to try to dispute something they can't understand, because it's easier to say, no, it's not real, than it is to face that, yes, this is. And why wouldn't that be traumatic for her?
Well,
You
she
have a
flat
mass
out looked at
murder,
me and
you
said,
have,
yeah, she
yeah.
said, dear, that house tried to kill us.
Yeah, like you have something that's moving, and you, even with George Lutz, there was claims that when he left the home, he was a lot healthier, a lot better. Why wouldn't that happen to Ron DeFeo? Of course, he'd be normal in prison, right? If this thing,
I don't think Ron DeFeo Jr. was ever normal.
no, you know what I mean. I agree with you, Laura. You know I do.
I
I
know.
love you, and you have such integrity, and I don't question anything. I'm saying he
was in an environment that there was no way he
possessed.
could waver. Like, he
Yes.
wasn't going to come out smelling like roses in any way, shape, or form. Essentially, is
No.
what you're saying, right? Like, he was in that kind of an environment that was a dark and foreboding place.
Yeah, but he didn't have those tendencies. You don't hear about that with him after. I'm saying, like, there's a really good chance that something else was in the driver's seat with him, and that really,
with George,
it speaks
or
with Ron. It speaks volumes that he just gives all that information later, as if he didn't feel like he actually was there, but he knew he did it, and he knew what happened.
I think as time went on, that Ronnie DeFeo Jr. had told so many lies that he couldn't discern the truth from a lie himself.
Yeah.
As for George, I think as time went on, that house had more of a claim on him.
That's interesting. How so?
Because he kept trying from day one, he was trying to control the narrative, which you're not going to do with the entire New York and then later national media, international media. That's not going to happen. People are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to say what they're going to say.
Mm-hmm.
But he couldn't ever shake it. He couldn't move on with his life. This was a man who was a Marine,
Yeah.
who was running the family business, and he never really had a job after that. You know, Amityville became
Everything.
I don't know, his yeah, it was all consuming. And
The
when
bane of his existence, essentially.
well, yeah, because he kept going on the road. He kept, it's one thing to do interviews and host shows and stuff, but and in fact, the boys, Kathy, all seem very desperate for people to believe them.
But they live at an age, though. This is what we've talked about the last time you were on. We didn't talk about things like that back then. And you just so desperately need somebody to believe you. But I mean, from George's standpoint, I'll give him this. He lost everything. I mean, everything he had, they put into this house, and he lost everything pertaining to it. And I say that in a physical matter. Of course, you have you got out alive, and so did your family, right? That's everything. But I tend to wonder if it was just like, I'm not going to lose to this thing. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to tell my story, maybe trying to gain back whatever little bit of credibility he lost with all the faux pas that he tried to do.
But he ended up, but that type of intensity.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to call it PTSD,
sure,
or what have you. It destroyed his relation. He and Kathy ended up splitting up. The family was fractured.
Kept losing. Yeah.
Yes. But he refused to let it go. And then you have to take one thing that really struck me, and I still find tragic to this day, is that there were so many lawsuits involving Amityville. I never saw anything like it, whether it was with, he ended up suing Weber, the Cromarties, the people who were in the house after him. They were suing the Lutzes because the story became so infamous that people were showing up on their front lawn, ringing the doorbell. And that I call, I'm sorry. The Cromarties have to take responsibility. If you're moving into
a
house that has
stigmatized house.
That's what I was thinking. Why would you buy that house? It's not like they don't have access to it.
And they would have got a darn good deal on that house besides that, because it's been stigmatized not just with the DeFeos.
Well, that's how the Lutzes got it.
What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
George, look at what happened to George. Yeah. He dies at the age of 59 of a heart attack, just a few days after he had settled yet another lawsuit, this one with MGM over the 2005 remake of the movie that starred Ryan Reynolds. He didn't like the way he was depicted.
Oh, for the love of God. Sorry.
You can't.
It's pretty psychotic. Yeah.
But he was so invested in it. And by contrast, you look at Kathy. I think she didn't do any interviews after probably 1999, 2000. She passed away in 2004.
Yeah.
And she was on oxygen at the time of the Amityville Horror or Hoax 2-part documentary that was made by the History Channel, History's Mysteries. I was also in that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could see she was frail, and she says, I don't care what anybody says. I know what happened to me. The other thing about Kathy is you notice she fades out of the picture after the divorce. She's not seeking any publicity. She's not
Which
really
adds to her
doing,
credibility.
she's not really doing any interviews. What she was doing when she relocated to Arizona, and ironically, her first husband, she was in church, and her first husband is living in the same town, going to the same church, and they ran into one another. He was sitting behind her in the church pew. What are you doing here? What are you doing? Well, I live here. You do? And she basically was doing a lot of charitable work, delivering Meals on Wheels to people.
Yeah, integrity.
And her kids loved her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even Danny, who, you know, has a lot of contentious relationships. You know, he loved his mother.
They were really young going through all that. That's tragic.
And once they started to do interviews, I have a question here. Who was the medium who got ill during the Amityville Seance? It was Mary. It was Mary. It was not Alberta Riley. It was Mary. She actually ran out of in the middle of the seance and out of the house and vomited on the side lawn. You know, so that house had a long-lasting impact on a lot of people. And in terms of physical manifestations, you know, I was with the Warrens at the Conjuring House when they had a seance there, and I remember seeing the late Carolyn Perrin tossed, you know, across the room. That house, if you look at the Perrin house, the farmhouse, was a lot creepier, or a lot more of what you would expect from a haunted house than Amityville.
It's older too, right? It's old too. It's very old.
It's several hundred years old. The Amityville house was built in 1928, and it was moved. It was
but that land was haunted.
It was moved onto that plot of land where it is now.
Yeah, I remember you telling us that time, because if the land's haunted, that whatever's on it is going to be haunted.
It's going to remain the same for sure.
Well, an important distinction here, though, is if it was a ghost, like the ghost of the Defeo children who were killed as they slept, those children might be confused and might be more likely to stay at the physical place where.
Yes, and it depends. It depends if they're staying with their belongings and things like that. They may not stay on the land per se. The thing is with that too is if there is something stronger and more malevolent, that they tend to keep human spirits at bay. I've worked so many locations like that. And I worked one location where you hear things growling and you'd hear a child come through and say, it's coming, hide, hide. Like they hide from things. So they don't necessarily come out in the open, which is maybe why there may have been a lot of reports of that. I would like to think that children would be moved on. You don't like to ever think of children and who tragically die like that, to be stuck in an area. Like as a parent, that's very unnerving to think about things like that.
Well, I do have to say, I think it's kind of creepy when the Lutzes bought the house. They bought so much of the furniture. Now, obviously, not the mattresses and box springs, which were spoiled, but you know, the same bed frames. I would have a hard time putting my 5-year-old daughter in the same bedroom as Allison DeFeo sleeping in her bed.
When did they find out that the murders had occurred? Because I understood that Kathy wasn't aware of it till after.
No, they were very much aware of it. There was no way, if you lived on Long Island
Oh boy.
at that time,
Mm-hmm.
it was news all over the tri-state area.
So
And in
because
fact,
yeah.
George told me that they sat down and had a conversation with the kids
Mm-hmm.
and as a
Okay.
family, he,
Mhm.
Kathy, and her 3 kids, and said, well, listen, we have this house, but you know, some bad things have happened there, and we have this opportunity, and it's a beautiful house.
Yeah, they
How do you
changed
feel?
that part in the movie.
Yeah, but no,
Yeah.
they, you know, so were the kids, certainly the kids hear things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
So-
wouldn't be able to live in there just because it was such a tragic, not because of a haunting kind of thing, but in the sense of the crime that was committed there is horrendous.
We're closing it. We've got a few minutes left. We probably have about 10 minutes left. You had reported some experiences after when you went into the house on your own and with the new owners after that. Can you share that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, during the times I had been in the house prior to that,
Mm-hmm.
The February 23rd and then the March 6th seance, I
Mhm.
didn't feel, see, smell, touch anything out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was very surprised. And one of the things that, you know, during the seance, as one of our listeners, Jackie, had said, who got ill,
Mm-hmm.
the psychics were having very strong reactions during the seance.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
One got ill, another one started screaming and said, it's in the second floor bedroom, it's moving. I don't know
Mhm.
what it was except a presence. The
Mhm.
2 reporters, Mike Linder from WNEW Radio, which was the sister station to Channel 5, was on my left, and Marvin Scott was on my right. And at one point during the seance, and both of those 2 men were Scorpios, and both were avowed skeptics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Marvin leans over and said, hey, I just felt a chill. And then 5 minutes later, Mike leans over and said, hey, I just felt a chill. I didn't feel anything. And I'm looking, I'm like, my first thought was, gee, I guess I'm not even worth haunting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you had people, we had our photographer who became ill with heart palpitations when he went
Yes.
up the stairs. And that
Mhm.
one spot at the top of the stair landing seemed to be a hot spot. So the house was very chaotic that night. It was a party atmosphere. There was nobody who was, you know, this was not scripted.
Mm-hmm.
No.
The Lutzes
Right.
had invited some people. The Warrens had invited some people. Channel 5 had extra people. So you had 22, 23 people in the
It's a
house that
lot
night.
of
You're not
energy
getting a
and
lot of
fear.
action. No.
Yeah.
So you weren't going to get, you know, other than these things that were happening to individuals, but it was like a scattershot thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ping, ping,
Yes.
ping. You didn't see one thing like the table levitating.
Wow.
You didn't see spirits appear, etc. So after that was all over, I was thinking about it. I said, you know, the reporter in me, I want to go back there. I had their house keys. And so a couple of weeks later, in early April, it was just before Palm Sunday, it was a Saturday afternoon, I decided to go back into the house in the middle of the day, you know, high noon, rather than sunset and stuff. But I
It
was
still takes courage.
yes, I was, well, not really. I mean, when you're 20, 21 years old, you feel like you're invulnerable. But I was
throw caution to the wind and jump in with both feet.
well, I was frankly curious. I said, okay, maybe I only have the sensibilities of a pet rock here, but I don't see, smell, sense anything.
Those
Let
were
me go
big
back in
things.
when the house is quiet. But as a cautionary measure, I decided to take my German Shepherd
Smart move.
lab mix Fritz with me, who was a big 120-pound dog. But that dog was sort of an empath. He was very, very sensitive. So and a very calm dog. He's also in the prime of his life. He's about 4 at the time. So we go into the house, and I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't tell the Lutzes I was going. I just did this on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm amazed that the couple next door did not call the police.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm walking around. I left the dog, off his lead, and I just started walking around. And everything was still as we left it weeks before. The gingerbread house from Christmas was still on the dining room table. And again,
That's creepy.
I'm walking through there. I don't feel anything out of the ordinary. I don't sense anything. I don't smell anything. I didn't see any green slime. I did not see any flies, nothing. All of a sudden, I'm back by the sunroom or what have you, and I hear a noise in the front of the house, and I recognize it's my dog who's growling. So I walk back, and the dog, Fritz, is still in the foyer, and he's standing there with a very fixed stare.
Mm-hmm.
His teeth were bared. His ears were pinned back.
Mm-hmm.
His
He's
hair.
standing stock still, and he's looking like if just fixed stare, not moving. But what really struck me is that the dog's, the hackles were up on his back from his neck all the way to his tail.
Yeah.
And he's not moving. Now, this is a New York, this is a Queens, New York dog.
Yeah.
He's used to a lot of activity.
Yeah.
I take him into the city, Central Park. He's used to traffic. One time, my grandmother's house, her landlord, their son was visiting, and he had a bushy beard, and we were upstairs, and Fritz ran down the stairs. He thought it was a burglar and he was going to get the guy. The guy just made it into the house. So this was not a cowardly dog.
No, German Shepherds are known for.
No, but I had never seen him react that way before.
No,
Okay,
not like that. No.
He didn't like fireworks. If fireworks were there, he'd cower in the bathtub, on 4th of July. But when it came to people, you expect the dog to react to strange noises or sounds, but this was totally different. He's just standing there. He's not moving. If it had been a squirrel in the attic, or if he had smelled a human, I have no doubt he would have charged up the stairs, just like he did, at my grandmother's house when he thought the landlord's son was a burglar. So I'm like, Fritz, what's wrong? What's the matter? Nothing. No, he's just looking at this thing. And I'm like, so now I'm looking. What's up there? I don't, again, nothing is happening. I didn't see anything. So I started to go up the stairs, and I got halfway up, and I said, think about this, Laura. At that point, it was probably the dog's reaction that was also spooking me. But I had the distinct feeling in my gut, this is not good. I trust the dog and his instincts. He can see, sense something that I can't feel.
Correct.
And
animals are amazing.
If you go up there, you're going to be messing with something, and it might mess back with you. Because up until that point,
it left you alone.
Michelle, I had always felt that whatever was going on there wasn't interested in me.
No, don't make it interested.
Yeah.
Stay out of its space. Yeah.
Now is a time, discretion is the better part of valor. So I came down the stairs, said, come on, Fritz, let's go. And I'm out of there.
Yes.
Okay.
But that was creepy. It was creepy. And I tell you, just from the dog being there, I started to tingle, when the hair.
Well, it's kind of a good thing that the dog was there.
Yeah, it was a smart move.
Yeah.
How did Lorraine take it when you told her that you did this?
Well, I'll tell you something. Because I wasn't supposed to be there, I didn't tell that story for many years after. So Lorraine, when I did tell her, she said, well, yeah, you were wise not to.
Right.
And I've never really been impacted by Amityville the way, in the sense that others have been impacted. I've been impacted in the sense that it's been a sort of ongoing thread, and things that I get asked about it a lot over the years, which to me is still amazing. The most amazing thing is that this is still indoors, and it's
We
just
come
one of
back
those
full
things.
circle to this fascination with this story, this place, this tragedy. It just hangs there, and you know.
And of course, many of the principals have passed away,
Yes.
Yeah.
which, so you're getting further away from it, and the mystique grows. I will say, for the record, that there were many exaggerations.
Yes.
And the
That's
Lutzes
normal.
admitted this when they were interviewed, that, the press had exaggerated, but they contributed to an extent to it. And of course, the movie and the books, which were based on a true story, also were, and Jay Anson said this when he was confronted with some of these things. He said, well, I took literary license.
Yeah.
So, and then over the years, certain things and facts people have conflated certain things, put them together, and come up with a whole other spin on it, which has nothing to do with the reality of what happened.
That's normal historically.
And I wish we had more time. But I mean, we're at the top of the hour, and unfortunately, we have to sort of leave it here. But I know, but you guys can look for Laura to come back in the new year on something different, because she is known for different stuff too. Even though
we
this
love
stuff
her.
is extremely exciting. But there'll be something a little bit different that we're all going to have her come back and talk to us all about. So I'm going to, I know. That's okay. You guys can still put your comments in, and we can
Yeah, and
make sure that Laura sees
I'm
them.
happy to answer questions on this. So, other people, by the way, it is not true that nobody since the Lutzes have lived there, almost 50 years ago, have had experienced things. Other people have gone in there and experienced things. Real estate agents have come out and said, hey, especially when, they're in certain spots in the house, the basement, certain things. I often wonder how the people who are living there in this the house has been totally redone. Okay. How they feel. I mean, if any of them even think, like the master bedroom looks nothing like it did when the Defeos and the Lutzes lived there.
Thank God.
But I often wonder.
It was all mirrors.
It's like slapping lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig. So
Yeah.
there's still stuff that isn't, embedded into it. So,
but I often wonder if the people who have lived there since, if you ever think, as they're just walking around the house or, sleeping in the master bedroom, oh, this was the scene of a violent murder.
it makes you wonder for sure. It really does. And we'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. So everybody, thank you all for tuning in to the Outer Realm tonight. Big thank you to Laura DiDio. We love her, and we love having her on, and we will have her back again. Big thank you to our sponsor, Folgers Coffee, for sponsoring us tonight and every other show night. Thank you. We appreciate you so much. Big thank you to Justin Snicker and Steve McGinnis. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. You guys just totally make it that much more exciting. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to everybody on X, and thank you to everybody on Rumble as well. And again, guys, we can see your comments. Put them up. And anyway, tomorrow night, okay, you spoke, we listened. Halloween night, we welcome the return of Wayne Mallows, who's going to be joining us by popular demand after his last appearance on the show earlier this month with all of his spooky tales. While he's got a whole bunch more. Some of them are unbeknownst to me sitting there across from him going, why have I never heard this before? So he's going to come on and share up all of his spooky tales, and then he will continue on to participate in our open mic portion of the show also. Now, tomorrow night, also before the Outer Realm, is Foot at the End of the Bed. Check them out from 7 until 9 p.m. Eastern, because they're having a Halloween party, and a lot of the hosts are all invited to drop in and participate during that 2 hours. You might just kind of have us kind of pop in there for a few minutes before the show. So go on, have a little bit of fun, and check them all out. So until then, guys, thank you all and have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.